I've not spoken to this many people in 4 months, even behind a screen. Hasn't it been a really bizarre experience? And I was thinking today about, I've learned so much in these last 4 months. Some of it's been easy, some of it's been difficult. And I bet we've all got our stories, haven't we? And it would take longer than the 5 minutes I've got to go through it. So I thought I would just share 3 of my takeaways from what I've learned in the last few months, and I hope that they might help you too. Very early on in this experience, I realised I was getting quite confused because I was trying to work out what basically what the rights and wrongs were of all that was going on around me. And there were people, I'm fortunate to have so many people in my life who are really clever and who I really trust and who have proven themselves time and time again in my life, in this building and outside of this building. I'm hugely grateful for that. But a few of them were thinking differently. And I had people who I equally trusted who had completely opposite opinions. And then I'm like, ooh, what's going on? And so I talked to all those people, and then I realized that actually if I was going to measure what was right and wrong in all of this, I was going to get in a right pickle. And so it was when I was talking to Chris, really, that she said to me, well, why don't you make your measure growth, not accurate information? And I cannot tell you how many times I have remembered that through this experience, because we can be so obsessed with who's right. Am I right? If I'm not right, I must be wrong. Are they right? If they're not right, they must be wrong. And we get so lost in this measure of whether or not someone's the expert or I'm the expert. And so very early on in this experience, I committed that I was going to grow. And I didn't know if I was going to get that growth right or wrong, but when you're growing, it doesn't matter, does it? You don't look at a child and say, well, you're growing just right, you're not growing quite so right. You just allow them to grow. And so through this experience, for me, I feel like every time I've got confused or muddled or had a challenge, or we've been trying to rescue a business or work out a problem or just my son's GCSEs were cancelled, bless him. And you're told that that's the right path, and then all of a sudden there is no path. How do you navigate that much change? You just have to commit to be like, well, I'm going to try and learn. And one of the things that I have recognized is that we live in such an instant culture, and we expect to learn overnight. What? How are we going to learn overnight? The learning that we need sometimes takes real time. And I've reflected a lot how sometimes we come to conclusions way too quickly, and then we box them off like, done, tick, right, know that now. And it just doesn't work like that. I've read a lot of books. If you speak to my boys about how many books I've read, I've been a tiny bit obsessive, but I'm an extrovert and I've not had many people. That's my excuse. But I read this book today, and I've been in education for years, so it always resonates with me when they talk about learning, because it said there's a body of evidence that shows that learning is best done slowly to accumulate lasting knowledge, even when that means performing poorly on tests of immediate progress. The most effective learning looks inefficient. It looks like falling behind. And I read that this morning, and I just thought, I turned 45 2 weeks ago, and I have to say I've never learned so much as I am learning now. I hope I never stop learning, but I tell you, I never knew as much as when I was in my 20s. Tell you what, I knew everything. So, yeah, someone should have told me at the time, nah, you got a lot more learning left to do yet, Jen. And sometimes what we do is we don't take the time to learn the range of things that just takes the time it takes, because we chunk it off, we box it off, and then we think, right, that's done. Now, I was thinking about the fact that that's because our mind is also a muscle. And if you were to sit and watch an exercise class, you wouldn't expect to have got fit, and yet we'll listen to what someone else has to say and think that means that we've exercised our own mind. And it doesn't. To exercise your own mind, you have to think. You have to think. And just because sometimes what will happen is someone else will say, and I've done it a lot of my life, someone will say something and I think, oh, right, okay, they've said that then. My mind is now fit. And it doesn't work for your body and it won't work for your mind. It's about how do we think critically, how do we hear, how do we be open to learn, how do we expose ourselves to a range of thinking and then work that mind muscle to make it something that grows us. Now, the second thing I've learned, the next two are shorter, I promise. I've had 4 months. Be kind. The second thing I've learned is that people are a lot better in 3D, not 2D. I have spent a huge amount of time on Zoom. Connie knows. She's been on a number of calls with me. I've seen Connie for hours on Zoom. A huge amount of hours on Zoom, and you lose something when you only have 2D. You lose the subtleties, you lose the expressions, you lose the movement, because you don't have that third dimension. And one of the things we've heard is about that third leg of the stool. How, yes, you can have your life and you can know everything in the inside out of your life, but unless we add another dimension, we're always going to be a bit wobbly. And it really spoke to me about that third dimension, because, it's so hard to say, how do you define spirit? How do you put a definition on that? But what I do know is that when I have to have another dimension to my thinking. Q's always been a part of that, and before that when it was The Rock. Reading books has become a part of that for me, because otherwise I'm going to get so lost in the 2D of my own life that I understand so very, very well and I'm such an expert at, that I won't allow anything else to shape my thinking. And giving myself time to just have another dimension in my life has quite honestly probably kept me sane. So I recommend it. And finally, I was thinking about, we talk about, if I'm saying to you, let your measure be growth, not right or wrong, what sort of growth do we mean? And how long you got? But I thought, well, how would I define and link those 2 points together? And growth, you think of planting, you think of, flowers and trees and all sorts. And I remembered this morning that in Galatians, it talks about the fruit of the Spirit. So if you're growing your spirit, what are some of the fruit that's going to be growing? And so there's love. How's your love growing? Joy, peace, patience, forbearance. Right, you ready to exercise your muscle on this one? It might hurt. You ready? Forbearance means a refraining from the enforcement of something such as a debt, right, or obligation that is due. It's to do with tolerance. If you are growing your spirit, guess what? You'll be really tolerant of others. I think that's a mighty challenge, isn't it? And I've put, let that one make you ache. When you work out, you don't half ache. Sometimes the reason why your brain hurts with some of this stuff is because you're working it. It's good. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And it says, against such things, there is no law. So you can't measure them on right and wrong. You measure them on whether they're growing within you. So you might be free to challenge me on this one, and you can have this conversation with me afterwards. But in all Western and Eastern views of spirituality, every single one of them links enlightenment to how we treat ourselves and fellow humans. So if you're growing your spirit and you're becoming enlightened in whatever you're growing in your life, we're probably going to see that in how you treat yourself and in other people. And if your growing means crushing, harming, or discounting others, well, that's an interesting one for me. So these are my 4 pieces of advice. Can I give you 4 pieces of advice from what I've learned? And then next week, someone can come up and tell me what you've learned, because I'd love to know. Number 1, let's focus on growing, not on being right or wrong, ourselves and others. Let's always have people in your life who think differently to you. If everyone in your life thinks the same as you, find someone who doesn't and treasure them. They're your greatest gift. I've got a bunch of people who don't agree with me. It's amazing. Hurts, though, sometimes, doesn't it? Take time to form your conclusions and then don't put a lid on them. If you've got some stuff that's got a lid on it, blow the lid off by talking to someone who thinks differently, and maybe give some thought tonight and maybe into this week about what growing spiritually means for you, because it might add another dimension to not only your thinking, but also to your humanity. So that's what I've learned so far.